This week on the Nonprofit News Feed, my name is George Weiner. I'm the Chief Whaler of Whole Whale, a B Corp digital agency, and we have Nick Azule. Nick is a digital strategist at Whole Whale, and we are both nonprofit geeks and nonprofit news focused. And this week, we've got some good ones. We're going to start off with a curious thought. What happens if your nonprofit loses a 501c3 classification? And why does that matter, Nick?
George, that's a great question and a great place for us to start off today. This is not a conversation I think we thought we would be having, yet here we are. In recent examples, the White House has publicly mused of the possibility to rescind Harvard's tax-exempt status for publicly resisting its demands. And this week, a U.S. attorney with the Department of Justice sent a letter to Wikipedia, quote, accusing it of permitting information manipulation and, quote, rewriting of key historical events and biographical information of current and previous American leaders. Great stuff. So, George, we thought that this would be an apt time to discuss what actually happens when a nonprofit organization loses its C3 status. I should point out that we are not attorneys, and best we can tell, the president can't just kind of unilaterally strip it. There's a process. But what would it mean if, let's say, the IRS did strip nonprofits of their status? Well, George, first, they would then become taxable entities and they would be required to file corporate income tax returns. That is tax on their income. They must pay taxes on net income, including donations and investment returns. Investment returns are how universities make money off their endowment. That could be a big sum of change, George. Additionally, contributions would no longer be tax deductible. So a massive incentive for donations in the current structure is a benefit you no longer have. You'd also lose out on a ton of funding and grant making from government agencies and foundations, which usually restricts such funding to fund C3s. And you'd also become eligible for state level tax burdens, right? You're now paying income, sales, and property tax, and you're just a regular old business, right? So, George, this is pretty dramatic, and there's an appeals process. And again, you can read more in depth about this in our newsletter. But, George, I think this is now a real thing that real 501c3s are trying to figure out how to stave off.
Yeah, it is certainly something that they've been looking to weaponize. We saw them try to put through legislation that would have expedited the ability for the IRS without any oversight whatsoever to simply wave a wand and remove this status, no questions asked. It is now clear this is an attack on nonprofits. It is now clear that the administration is trying to go at the fundamentals of sort of truth and the ability to find it. You know, looking at this list of organizations that they're going after: Harvard, Wikimedia Foundation, Crew, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington were also under attack. Environmental and humanitarian nonprofits and climate-focused nonprofits. So this isn't just a one-off. There's beyond, the headlines, a lot of organizations that are being threatened with this removal of 501c3. So becoming more real. We have some other mitigation strategies, but it is something that clearly in the nonprofit sector, it means that nonprofits have power. Their work matters, and this administration is aware of it. I guess on that positive note, it is working. They do see it as a threat because nonprofits are effective.
Yeah, George, I think that's a great summation, right? You don't attack things that you don't feel threatened by. If you are a nonprofit and you are concerned and you're thinking, well, if we think we're going to be under attack, what should we do? Some survival strategies that organizations might be considering include exploring fiscal sponsorships. So that's the equivalent of kind of outsourcing your tax exempt status to an umbrella organization, right? So you kind of exist within their infrastructure. You do, however, give up a level of autonomy and independence through doing that. You could also potentially restructure and reorganize under a different tax exempt structure, such as a 501c4, et cetera. Hospitals have different kind of tax exempt statuses, right? So I think there's like 27 or so different tax exempt statuses under the 501 code. So that's a potential option. But then also, George, lawyering up. Prepare for legal challenges, prepare for litigation, probably years. Harvard is putting together a legal team, very curiously, with former Republican and Trump administration attorneys, actually. they're picking the better to know the devil you kind of strategy there. But yeah, intense litigation potentially coming in the Harvard versus White House showdown. Something to consider. All right, George, with that, I can take us to our next story. And this is one that pretty alarming, George. I think we've known for a while that Elon Musk has been pulling the levers of the algorithm on X, formerly Twitter. For a while, it's been very clear that blue check paid accounts experience algorithmic priority. But George, the New York Times did an analysis and found out that people who disagreed with him, and quote, these were conservative influencers, so still people on the right who kind of got into public battles with him, had their accounts just completely throttled. There's a striking chart in this New York Times analysis that found that accounts that criticized him went from tens of thousands, millions of impressions and views per day down to like a mere 1% to 2% of that overnight, George. He's pulling the levers of who gets to see and who gets to say what on his platform. And if you are someone getting that volume of traffic to your tweets, you're also someone who's monetizing that. So in addition to kind of your speech being throttled, your ability to make money is also being throttled. George, the article didn't really go into too much, but there's a whole other layer here of like Elon Musk trying to like have children with like Twitter influencers. That's kind of creepy and outside this podcast. But if you're a nonprofit, George, you have to think really critically about the risks of operating on this platform that's really just operating under whatever Elon Musk decides is the algorithm du jour.
Look, here's the obvious sad truth of X as a platform is that one of your social media strategies should be to not challenge the administration, not challenge Elon Musk, and not speak truth to power. And if you do that, and also I'll note they have seen that if you pay for a blue check mark, you're actually getting algorithmic priority over regular posts. So if you pay to play and you play nice in the sandbox and don't speak truth to power, you might do pretty well on the platform, actually. So, there's your social media strategy actually for the platform.
Yeah, kind of a realist take there. But George, I couldn't tell if you were joking or not.
I'm not joking. I'm not joking. If you ask me to play by certain rules, and if I'm trying to get attention, that is how you will have to play on X. And I feel bad for social media strategists and people that are like spending time, like journalists that work tirelessly on the platform, and they're there simply because that's where other people are, and you're caught in this little sad little doom cycle in a billionaire's backyard. But that's your strategy. And if you're gonna go and run around in a lightning storm with a 30-foot metal pole, you can't be surprised. And hopefully this level of truth, revealing it and saying like, this is actually what's happening. And keep in mind, if you think that like this is one off, you don't understand how icebergs work. The part of the iceberg you see is smaller by an order of magnitude. There are a lot of folks on the Titanic that learned that the hard way. So if you are driving your social media ship toward that particular iceberg, I would say it was buried in so many articles. That's the thing, because we get overwhelmed. And I always come back to like, I'm looking back in 4 years and I'm like, how did I miss that fundamental article? Like, I think you really should stop and pin it to your wall and say like, this is literally what is happening. There are the data. It is black and white. That it is a one chart story. And it should be a real bellwether for understanding like where and how you spend your time on that platform. Use it for listening, but you're sort of shouting into a pointless void, I'd say, if you are trying to speak any truth to power on the platform.
Yep, George, absolutely agree. All right, I'll take us into our next one. And unfortunately, we still have to talk about Doge. And we really loathe doing this, George. We hate kind of the doom and gloom news. But the reality is that nonprofits are facing existential crises, and we have to talk about them. And this week, what we really need to talk about is Doge cut $400 million in funding from Americorps. Americorps is the National Volunteer Service umbrella organization, and these cuts are estimated to affect over 1,000 organizations and over 32,000 members and volunteers. Volunteers who were on site at Habitat for Humanity sites, folks rebuilding homes damaged by hurricanes. In Ohio, folks working with environmental nonprofits and farm to table projects were all just immediately told, George, to go home. So the program doesn't exist anymore. And these cuts come after recent actions placed most of Americorps' full-time staff, about 650, on administrative leave. They will probably be fired. And it seems, George, just a pretty swift and dramatic ramp down of national volunteering at a time when volunteer rates are already at historic lows for the sector. So, George, this will be existential for a certain segment of nonprofits that required the participation of volunteers from this specific subset of Americorps volunteers.
At this point, it's clear that this isn't a cost-saving measure anymore. It is a tour of retribution. It's targeting infrastructure, social supports, and you're literally out there carving up such small parts of the budget that do such outsized work to help humans, to help the environment, and looking at their total, original target of 2 trillion, which then was reduced to 1 trillion, which is downgraded to 150 billion, we're talking about $400 million being cut. That was disproportionately leveraging volunteers and the outsized impact that has. Let's park that for a corner. 400 million. Like, you're really doing a victory lap for that? I want you to take a look at one stat, and it's quite curious. Do you know how much a nuclear ballistic submarine costs to make? The estimate goes up to about $20 billion. So that's one submarine. And I'm national defense. We need what we need, and we need to pay for it. But I'm just saying, when you're over here doing a victory lap for cutting something like 400 million, just keep in mind, that's like, let's put it in submarines. That's like 2% of a submarine that you just did. So go do your victory lap as you gut these programs, but don't pretend like this is cost savings and helping America. It's simply not.
Yeah, George, and you bring that up, and you parked it. I'm gonna I'm gonna pull it out of the lot. This is a program that mobilized volunteers, folks making minimal amount of money to contribute to society. And we talk about big ideas about like National Year of Service and all these things. I can't think of a more efficient way to spend money than a national volunteer service program. And the fact that this is being cut is a travesty, and it's going to affect people affected by disasters. Those are the kind of projects these volunteers work on, right? Rebuilding homes, working on infrastructure projects. That's what they're doing, and it's going to help destroy volunteer infrastructure for Americans across the country, and it's really sad. All right, George, that's enough sadness. I need some happy. I'm kind of losing my mind, George. It's been a busy couple weeks here over in Brooklyn, but George, NBC 26 Northeast Wisconsin has given us the gift of understanding how the nonprofit Rooted in Ink recovered over 6,000 pounds of leftover food after the NFL draft in Green Bay, distributing high-quality meals to 13 local shelters and nonprofits. And the organization plans to expand its impact by offering cooking classes and teaching people how to prevent food waste in the future. George, I'm more of an NBA, NCAA basketball guy, so NFL draft's not kind of my thing. But I believe you that there's a whole of a lot of food there that needs to be distributed, and it's awesome to see a nonprofit stepping up and doing it.
We have enough food to feed all of the humans in this country many times over. What we don't have is the infrastructure to solve the last mile problem, that waste problem, the allocation. And so that's where obviously nonprofits really can step up, and see previous conversation about the types of cuts and the impact on infrastructure supported by nonprofits to help food insecure people is another area that you don't have to search very far to see the pain happening. Did I just turn the good one into the bad one? On the positive note, that's freaking awesome. Well done. I love the food distribution. Also, check out moveforhunger.org. They have moved millions upon millions of pounds, because when people move between houses, there's a lot of food waste, and they have created a brilliant network over there to help that food redistribution for food insecure families.
Yeah, absolutely. George, we both deserve like a puppy or something. We've been put through it.
I have 3 kids. I don't need any puppies. I'm good. Oh my God. A puppy would break us.
Gosh. All right, George. It's that time of the podcast when we do jokes. And somehow we've stumbled into this dynamic where we duel our jokes in a little bit of friendly competition. So we, in the newsletter, we will send out, you can vote for your favorite joke at the end of this podcast. George, I will start. What video game release is the nonprofit sector least excited about this year?
I don't know.
Grand Theft Auto 6.
Why the 6? So much Grand Theft.
There's 5 other ones. George, this is like the biggest video game release of like the decade.
So Grant Theft.
Grand Theft. You're stealing your high speed donor theft.
Gotcha. All right, that was a good one. I might lose this round. However, I do have a question for you, Nick. All right. How much does a nonprofit influencer weigh?
I have no idea.
And Instagram?
That's pretty good, George. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Not, but it is. All right, Nick.
It is.
All right. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, George.